We're going to get started. Call to order the City of Shelton Council meeting on October 2nd, 2018. Everyone please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, everyone. We'll start tonight with a report from Mike Sprowski from representing the Forest Festival on the use of lodging tax monies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. As the report in front of you shows, this grant, the lodging tax money, is a large part of our budget. It gets spent between the operating budget for the logging show, the commemorative program, and then our in-county advertising. And the in-county advertising is, in our paper and then our local radio. This year's event had a pretty good attendance of about 11. We estimated about 11,000 people. Of that 11,000 people, our estimate is that we had about 141 hotel stays. As you know, the weather always plays a big part in this, and Saturday's, the main event was well attended because we had very nice, mild weather. It wasn't too hot, so people stayed, throughout the day, even at the logging show. The car show, we had a little bit of rain, so our registration for cars was down about 150, but with 200, so we had 250 registrants. So what I'm getting to here is that half of those registrants were half of those hotel stays. So the car show brings in a lot of out-of-town folks for us. Our royalty court this year traveled to about the same venue as they normally do, capping off with, when I say venue, the same amount of parades, ending with the big one in Seattle. They drew a big award again this year. The kids really enjoy that parade, and it's fun for them to be on the local TV. So, 2019 is our 75th anniversary, and it's going to be, we're going to try to make this as big as an event as we can. And I don't know if you've seen the application for the 2019 LTAC request from us, but we're asking for a little additional money to help with the big event like that. We are hoping that we still have the steel timber sports coming back. I haven't heard that they're going anywhere else. They really like the event that we have. They like the venue at Loop Field, how well it's taken care of, the setting. And then, along with the 2019 event, we have tomorrow night, just happens to be our call for volunteers meeting at Roosters. So if you know anybody that's interested, Roosters, 5:30 tomorrow. We're always looking for volunteers in all parts of Forest Festival. So that's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions for Mike?
Thank you very much for your involvement in this organization for our community.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, next we have Community Development Director Mark Ziegler has some certificates to present.
Yeah, thank
Mark?
you, Mayor, council members. A monumental project just got completed in the city of Shelton, which is the restoration of the historic log monument up at Overlook Park. And we have some very important people here to recognize for their parts in that restoration. That work hasn't been completed since the mid-90s, and we're seeing some degradation of those logs. And as you know, the logs were placed in 1953 as a 100-year commemoration to logging in Mason County. So they've been up there for some time. They take some maintenance in order to keep them in place and keep them secure and visible and and viable for generations to come. And when we started talking about this project originally, we had the Mason County Master Builders step up right off the bat and take a lead in preserving the logs themselves. Christmastown Kiwanis, who annually plants flowers around that log monument to beautify that, and does another number of projects around there over the years. Also stepped forward and provided some support. Builders First Source, I always want to say ProBuild when I mention them. Builders First Source provided some materials for that project. And then once we really started looking at it, we looked at the structure itself and saw some deficiencies there back in 1953 when the log was installed. To today's standards, it probably wasn't going to withstand too many more years of the weather and maybe even a seismic event. So I contacted Air Pacific Industries. They jumped on board and really went above and beyond with their work in securing those structures there. So tonight I've got Dan Dixon, Mike Isaguro, I believe, right? All right. Julie Nichols, Patty Tupper, Leroy Valley, Andrew Spear. With these three organizations, I'd like to hand a certificate off to them and get a photo op, if you don't mind coming on up here, and we'll get that taken care of. This has been a project that was over $12,000 in donations and materials and in-kind services to help restore and preserve this structure. So again, a monumental effort for a monument for the city of Shelton. So we really appreciate their time and efforts. And I'll hand these to you if you want to just, Andy, what do you think, right in front of the podium here?
What are we looking this way?
Okay. Yeah, go on up. Andrew's the head cheese and
Let's squeeze together.
All right.
Squeeze together. Good picture.
Thanks, Mike.
The one thing that I really heard from everybody involved was how honored they were to work on the project, and it really took me back because they're donating their time, or their agencies are donating time on their behalf. And Heather Heslop is one of the other people that worked on it, and she's living in Spain now, and she actually did the resurfacing on the structure. And she was up there in July when it was 90 degrees in a Tyvek suit and looked like she just got out of the shower and was sweating, and then Mike and his partner up there that were under the log welding on that thing and making sure they preserved that structure as long as they could. So it's really impressive that the skilled laborers and the people that we have interested in this community that stepped up and helped us out here. So really appreciate it. Thank you all.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, Kathy.
So I always love grassroots community projects. One is the clock tower, how we raised the money for that. And now the log, the money came in. So I just want to say thank you for everything you did to preserve that log. It's been a subject of talk of visitors visiting our town, come down and see that log. So thank you very, very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kathy. Well said. Okay, we'll move on to council reports and start with Councilmember Dorsey.
All right. On 9/18, which was our last meeting, I also had a Mason Transit Authority Board meeting that day. On 9/19, I met with Mr. McCarty for the first time from 11 to noon. 9/20, we had the State of the City luncheon out at Little Creek at 11:30. And 9/21 was Friday. We had another budget meeting, Civic Center at 8:30. So I think it only lasted till 1 this time, or so. 9/22, I attended the graduation of the police recruits. Is that the right way to put that? Reserve Academy. That was interesting. And then I went to a ribbon cutting for American Insurance on just the other day. That's it for me.
Councilmember Nisco.
Since the last meeting, we went to the State of Community at Little Creek Casino, and I also attended the graduation for the Police Academy. On the 26th, I had a Housing Behavioral Health Board meeting. And then a meeting tomorrow with Abe Gardner with the Health Department of Mason County. And that's it. Oh, in this Oyster Fest, I'm working the YMCA booth.
Councilmember Franz?
Well, talking about Abe Gardner, I did meet with him today, had a nice conversation about some of the things he is proposing to do here in this community. I attended all the budget meetings, staff briefings, looking forward to Oyster Fest this weekend. I did have a conversation with the YMCA last week, the fundraising committee, and like each and every one of us, we meet and talk to the citizens of Shelton pretty much about Shelton issues every single day. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, sir. My week last week was State of Community, presented the Shelton view of our state of our community, swore in 5 reserve police officers, and thank you, Chief Moody, for the opportunity. And I guess one of those reserves and the transfer swore those in as Shelton police officers. That was a nice day. Thank you. Met with the state auditor on an entrance interview, sat in on the entrance interview that she had with the staff as a council representative, and also met with her on a risk assessment interview with the governing body. This upcoming week, attending the Mason County Housing Authority meeting tomorrow, also meeting with Abe Gardner with Mason County Health, and meeting with Jim Morrell from Peninsula Credit Union. He's got a affordable housing workshop summit coming up, and he's going to talk to me for a little bit. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. My report this evening is rather light. I was under the weather last week, so I was not at that budget meeting. I did, however, the previous week meet with Mike McCarty. Thank you, Mike, for taking the time, as well as attending the State of the Community event. This week I had a meeting with Abe Gardner as a follow-up to the committee that I sat in on opioid stakeholders. I was lucky enough to have some time with Chief Moody and with Captain Fiola to discuss how some of those issues are seen in our community and what some of those pressure points are and what we can try to do to help those folks. So I anticipate that conversations with Abe will continue and we'll report back to this group. Other than that, it's nothing to report.
I had my left board meeting this morning. I'm going to be meeting with Abe Gardner tomorrow morning for a little while. Thursday, I have my weekly briefing, I think. Next week, candidate forum, Wednesday Lions Club. Thursday night, I will be attending the celebration of the opening of the Shelton High School Health Science Academy at the high school. So that's my week, this week and next week.
Councilmember Schmidt.
Good evening. Light workload last week, but prior to that, attended the State of the Community, the weekly or first briefing with interim city manager McCarty, and attended the Police Academy Reserve Academy graduation as well on Saturday. And bravo to our Shelton Police Department for putting that on. It was a fantastic event, and it was great to see the 5 folks come forward to volunteer their time for the city of Shelton. So I'm looking forward to seeing that continue. So
Okay.
That's it.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to general public comment, and this is open. Anyone signed up? This is covering anything that's not on the action agenda. We'll have time for specific comments on items on the action agenda. So is there anyone signed up for general public comment?
Yes, we have Stephen Marler.
Mr. Mayor, council members, I'm back again regarding the municipal waste collection requirement in our municipal code. I had a conversation today with the Public Works Director and was told that the death of my mother-in-law did not constitute a special circumstance for which the need for collecting garbage could be eliminated. And so I'm just back here reiterating the fact that we need to follow up with this and determine a list of special circumstances that the director can follow, as well as the fact that
We're trying to improve the public appearance of this city. The council a month ago just authorized the spending of roughly $500,000 on a study to improve the curbside appearance of Shelton for both businesses as well as community members to move into this city. And if we don't go after these issues like this, how can we expect for people to want to move their businesses and their homes into Shelton? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Anybody else?
Tom
Donna?
Davis.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. For the record, my name is Tom Davis, and as you know, I'm involved with the Ponza Group, nonprofit organization, to construct 30 tiny homes for homeless veterans in Mason County. You were nice enough to meet with us and the Ponza Group about 6 or 7 weeks ago, and I'd like to bring you up to date with what has been happening. Briefly, I'll try to squeeze it all in 3 minutes because I know there's a subcommittee, and we'd like to talk to the subcommittee personally about some concerns. But as far as the updates are concerned, I think that's we should be public knowledge also, so everyone can see that we're moving forward. The first thing, as you know, the Department of Commerce has loosened the purse strings a bit, which had put us in a bind, so we were able now to go out and get a site plan, which I am not going to show you tonight. I'm going to wait for the subcommittee meeting. But we have a site-specific plan at this point, so it's something that we can both look at. It's a rough draft, but I think all the major elements are in place, and I think you'll be pleased with it. The design committee is zeroing in on the floor plan for the tiny homes. It appears right now that it'll follow the same floor plan as Ording, about 174 square foot each. I'll show you a plan of that also during the subcommittee meeting, and each unit will include a shower. So that'll be a step up, certainly, from Curie Village. It appears that we are still talking, but I believe we're very close to an agreement in how the proposed site, will be cleared and by whom. So I think we've come to a very reasonable compromise. I won't get into the weeds on it, but that seemed to have been at least a talking point, if not an obstacle. And I think that's going to be a remedy that we're all going to agree with easily. Conversations with the city include now the interim city manager, Mike McCarty, and our group met with Mike yesterday, and I thank you very much for seeing us. We felt that it was appropriate, and Craig felt appropriate also, that we bring Mike into this conversation as quickly as possible. So we're all kind of on the same page, and it was a very beneficial meeting for us, very productive, and I hope you feel the same way. The lease agreement, John Collins is here. The lawyers are not talking to me because when they're in negotiation, that's just what it is. And so I can't comment on it at this time. I know there are two lawyers that are talking, and when they come to some sort of resolution or draft agreement, I assume we'll hear about it then. But so far, we'll wait to see what you guys come up with. And real quickly, we need to schedule a meeting with the subcommittee to address some of the concerns the subcommittee has. We're very anxious to do that. The sooner the better. So I'm kind of counting on Mike here to talk with you, and we'll make ourselves available at your convenience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
No more public.
Okay, new sound?
New sound.
Thank you, Donna. Okay, we'll proceed to the consent agenda. Are we ready for the reading of the consent agenda?
Yes.
Okay. Donna, could you read the consent agenda, please?
Voucher number 18646 in the amount of $6,942.32. Vouchers numbered 18665 through 18743 in the amount of $242,954.98.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, consent agenda is accepted as read. Thank you. Okay, first business agenda item is community development. Mark Ziegler has information about some property at the Shelton Marina.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. As you may be aware, the Port of Shelton, we recently went through some public process on long-term use of the marina. They are coming to a conclusion with that decision-making process at this time, and one of those decisions may be very well be to surplus that property. In this fact-finding and information process, they came to the city with something that I did not certainly know about anyway, which is there's deeded parcels underneath the existing Oakland Bay Marina, 12 of those, which were deeded to the port in 1950 that have a reversion clause. That reversion clause states that if they are no longer used for port purposes, that the city can exercise that reversion clause and take ownership of those parcels. So today is information for you and hopefully some direction for staff and how we proceed with our conversations with the Port of Shelton in moving forward. If they do declare that surplus and look at sale of that marina, they certainly would like to have that deed of those 12 parcels cleaned up and taken care of at that time. There's a couple options as staff sees it, and that's take ownership and therefore liability of the improvements and what might lie within those parcels, and then decide what the city wants to do at that point, whether it's sell, lease, negotiate further at some point. Two, they can just waive the reversion clause and deed those parcels to the port themselves, or waive the reversion clause, deed the parcels to the port, and then negotiate a level of public access on the property, which was the intent of the original deed, obviously, was to, the Port District would provide some public access under that deed from 1950. I know Mr. Collins has looked at this a few times, so it's nice to have him here if you have some questions regarding legal aspects of this matter. But it's certainly, I'm open to input from the council on how to proceed with the Port of Shelton.
Thank you, Mark. Comments, questions for Mark?
Yeah, is this an opportunity for us to potentially put this into a study session at the recommendation from our interim city manager to start maybe diving into this in more of a study session format in the month of October? That being said, do you know what the specific timeline is with the port right now? Or is this something that would potentially delay or cause delay?
Potentially. Obviously, they're tied to this deed. And they're probably going to have a tough time selling it or doing something with it if that's the direction they wanted to go with that deed reversion clause in there. So they're at the mercy of the city a bit.
Okay.
How we want to proceed with that, knowing that information is certainly our prerogative.
If they deeded it back to us, then you don't have any idea at this point what it would cost to clean that area up, if any needed.
There's unknown factors. The parcels are within the tidelands.
Okay.
So they're underneath the current marina. So in various locations, and they're not contiguous, they're in several locations underneath the marina themselves. So the boathouse is on site on the marina. They fall underneath those in the tidelands themselves. And they're not all contiguous, so it's not one piece
They're
of
just-
tidelands. And
Okay.
there's several in order. And then on the north side, and then there's a few more on the south side where the south dock is located.
And right at this point, we wouldn't know what that would benefit the city to take him back, what it would benefit.
The benefit may be providing that public access, but there certainly is a lot of liability involved with the improvements that are already on those parcels.
Yeah, okay.
If the port, we deeded them back to the port and they sold it, could we benefit from the parcels that we deed back to them? Could that be part of the giving it back to them permanently, they sell it, and then we get our
That's-
share.
I think that could be a negotiating piece. The public information that the port has put out recently is that they have a $3 million price tag for repairs and replacement of their south dock. And every indication to us is that any potential sale wouldn't be very fruitful with those, with that liability involved.
Yeah.
As it is now, that the, most likely, there's not much value there, I guess, in the marina with those improvements that need to be considered.
Waterfront's value to somebody.
Again, these are within the tidelands.
I'm talking about the whole package, you know, they sell the whole package.
Yeah.
The yacht club, the whole piece is value to somebody.
Mark, is the other land around there, is that fee ownership by the port?
Some of it is, some is leased from DNR.
Okay, but some of it is
Yeah.
fee ownership by the port.
Correct, as well as we do have rights of way. The city has several rights of way that run through the tidelands as well. This will be a separate consideration from the council down the road because it's a separate matter. There's more restrictions on rights of way and whether we can vacate.
Yeah.
Trying to come up with vacate. And there's restriction on whether we can vacate. So we could lease those potentially to the port or whatever ownership might come into play there. But we can't vacate those or turn those over. So there is the ability for the city to maintain some public access or some stipulations of public access with those rights of ways as well.
But the port's not looking to sell them. They're just these ones that they want to deed, thinking about deeding back to the city. They're not looking to sell the whole to a developer, are they? The whole yacht club area, the
When
waterfront?
they're considering surplus which might include sale of the entire marina.
Okay,
Again, that decision has not been made by the port.
right.
Sort of back to my original comment, something maybe I think we should just look at in a study session, just to think about.
I agree. I think we should
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
another look at this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really sure of all the details and whatnot.
And I'll just ask this question, that's independent of the three options put forward? Or is that contingent on selecting one of those options and then have a study session on how to deal, recommendations on what options are included,
I think we should meet and discuss,
the whole scenario?
yeah.
Okay.
And likely with John, have a more constructive conversation where we can talk about risk, liability, value, et cetera, in that format. If
Okay.
that's-
Sounds good.
Then
Yeah.
we'll plan a studying session to address the whole issue then.
If you'd like any further information leading into that,
Yeah.
please let me know, and I can certainly solicit that from the port.
Yeah,
So
now-
you've got everything in
Yeah,
front of you.
that'd be great. I think now that we kind of have those three options, we can ruminate on that a little bit, and if anything comes up.
And Mark, one thing that you provided to us previously that might be worth looking at again is the map that shows all of the overlapping property lines within that
Absolutely.
area, because I think it shows how this decision may affect future decisions.
Certainly.
Correct. That's a good point. I almost couldn't even see the,
It's quite a convoluted map,
Yeah.
yes, you're right.
Okay?
thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to the next item, which is also from Director Ziegler about some surplus real estate.
Thank you, Mayor. The city owns a parcel at 120 West Nealon Street that was obtained through tax foreclosure sale. I believe back in 2013. So that's the site of the old Parkview Manor Apartments that the city received a abatement ruling on through the hearing examiner. It went through a fire and was dilapidated for some time. The city abated that property, and then in 2013 made the decision to actually purchase the property when it went up for tax foreclosure. City staff has determined there's no useful need for this property. So the most logical step is surplusing that and relieving it of the city's maintenance requirements and putting it on the market.
Is that right behind the Ritz?
Correct,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, it's about 7,500 square feet, 50 by 150 lot. Again, was was an old apartment complex
Yeah.
back in the day, if you remember that. With your approval, place a resolution on the consent agenda or the action agenda, excuse me, for October 16th. And with that, staff would develop RFPs for real estate broker services and move forward with securing a broker to list the property for sale.
Okay,
Sounds
comments, questions from the council?
Just a point of clarification here. That particular property, if it was sold, may come with through like the grandfathered policy on it concerning the sewer and water hookups, because it was a hotel, I believe. Maybe, I don't know, 20, 25 units or something. So if we were listening it with a realtor, we want to make sure that we clarify exactly what would come with that, because if you were a builder or a developer and you wanted that and make that into a livable 20 or 24 unit thing, the cost of the water and sewer hookups, if they were grandfathered in, would be more than the price of the property. So obviously, we wouldn't want that to slip through our hands and not be aware that if that went with the sale of that property, that could be more valuable than the property itself. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay. All right, so while we go ahead and read Resolution 11370918.
Well, can I hold on just for a
Oh,
second?
sorry. Gary.
Craig, is that accurate? Do you know?
Water GFCs, yes.
It is accurate.
Water and sewer GFCs certainly would be a factor if a developer didn't have to pay those were already established. That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay,
Makes sense to me.
all right. Go ahead, Donna.
Resolution number 1137-0918, a resolution of the City of Shelton, Washington, declaring certain real estate under city ownership surplus to the needs of the city.
Okay, and we can go to move that forward to October 16th? All right, thank you. Okay, next item is for Public Works Director Gregory about 2018 pump repair contract.
Thanks, Mayor, council members. Down at the Front Street lift station, we have 4 booster pumps that push sewage to the main plant. 2 of those went down in early 2017. We repaired those under an emergency order. Because we knew that the other 2 of the 4 were failing, these are not readily available. They take some time to get. So we purchased those under an emergency situation, and nevertheless, the other 2 actually went down also, and we went to bid in early September, had a bid opening in mid-September with 1 responsive bidder for the 2 booster pumps and also a grip pump from down at the main wastewater treatment plant on Fairmont Avenue. The total bid for the 3 pumps totaled just over $184,000. With that being said, the 2 main booster pumps ended up at about $160,000, at about $80,000 apiece. You can understand how expensive those are. Luckily, with our insurance, we do have coverage on all of our pumps with those failing, and we do have a $10,000 deductible on each pump for a total of $30,000 in deductible. So we will continue to work through that process if we move forward with this fix of the pumps to make sure that the insurance gets all of the information and we get paid for the repair of those pumps.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments from the council?
How old were the pumps when they failed?
Those pumps are about 10 years old. We have done an extensive study on the Front Street booster pump station. Those should have not failed in that time period. We have had PUD out to make sure that we had clean power going into the booster pump. At this point, it looks like it was a grounding issue. There's a ball bearing, a very large ball bearing that sits on top of the pump that ultimately ended up looking like a manufacturing issue, but after 10 years, they were not under warranty still. But they have done a coating of that ball bearing now that is supposed to alleviate the issue without totally coming up with a solution to what the problem was with all of the booster pumps. That is with the help of a consultant and several engineering groups, the best that we could determine that that ball bearing was going to ground. And with the new coating on the ball bearing, we don't anticipate having an issue in the future with these.
So my next question will just be, is there a typical preventive maintenance that gets conducted on these things, or?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
on a monthly and then annual basis with a further inspection of all of those, as we do with all of our pumps.
So you would, by inspecting them then regularly, it sounded like these weren't inspected regularly.
This is not something that we could have foreseen. This is a very large ball bearing that is embedded in the actual pump.
Oh, you
So
can't just
there-
go in and.
It would take disassembling the entire
Okay,
pump to
all right.
get to it, to see if you had any scarring or anything
Okay.
on that bearing. So it was not something that we would normally inspect
Okay.
for. That would take a professional to come in and actually tear those pumps down.
We don't want to do that.
But yeah, so not something that would be under normal
Oh,
maintenance.
okay. I got it. I don't know.
I seem to remember those pumped for 40,000 each.
Actually, they're about 160,000 each brand new, 80,000 to repair.
And we had insurance on the last two that,
That's correct. Yep, that we have worked through and gotten reimbursement for.
And insurance.
Okay, a couple
Well,
questions.
we need to
One,
have backup pumps.
The insurance you reference is known, it's not an estimate, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And
then-
we have worked through the previous pumps and gotten reimbursement for those.
Okay, and then the one bid, is that due to the uniqueness of the pump?
Exactly.
Okay,
It is. It's a very specific pump and not a lot of manufacturers and folks that can actually rebuild those. So yes, you are exactly correct.
okay, all right, thanks, Frank.
You're
Any
welcome.
questions? All right. Consensus to place this on the agenda, for the action agenda for 16, October 16?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Next, Director Greger's going to speak about a vacation of some property on 4th Street.
So again, Mayor, council members, thank you very much. We have discussed this particular vacation of 4th Street off of Grant for almost a year now. We started through the proceedings about 12 months ago and did not come up with a resolution to the issue. It was slowed by the former city manager that thought that we should have a policy basically in place that required the payment for a vacation, which we actually do, just not sure that how much we have followed that policy in the past, but there is a city policy that does give the, at that time, commission, now council, the ability to require some sort of compensation from zero up to the full appraised value. We did do an appraisal on this property almost a year ago. It did come in at about $25,000. It is a full-size city lot. It's 60 feet wide, so it could be a single-family residence, but really just wanted to open up the discussion with the council moving forward to get some sort of resolution. The applicants have been waiting for a significant amount of time on a decision with this, so we would really like to have some direction on where staff should move forward on with this, and then ultimately put it on the action agenda once we get some sort of direction.
So where exactly is that? Is it down the hill and around Kineo Avenue? Isn't that kind of down?
It's on Grant Street, so if you were to go,
Come up by the old,
I'm gonna date myself here, the old Kentucky Fried Chicken, if you
Right,
were to go up the
right.
hill there and make your first left onto 3rd Street, it is almost directly off of that left onto 3rd Street. You would then go on to Grant, and it is the the
Oh.
second parcel in,
Okay.
basically on Grant.
Okay.
All right, so is this lot a buildable lot? In your opinion?
It has a lot of,
Park.
a lot of issues with it. It's on a very steep, critical slope. I had a conversation with Mark and Jason in planning today. It's on a critical slope that is defined within the comp plan and has several issues with it. So without an actual geological study on the property, I'm not sure that it's buildable. That is debatable, but ultimately, without having that study, that is really going to be up in the air.
Could it be a park?
Well, it looks like, to me, it looks, well, over here it says about half the portion of the property is level at street grade,
That's correct.
partly cleared and seeded terrain. And you look at this photograph with this RV sitting there, it's pretty flat right there. It appears to me that possibly they might want to build an RV carport, but who knows?
That is what the applicant has expressed to us, that is the intent. And that was a stumbling block that we had almost 12 months ago, was the requirement for a geo report. And that did delay things somewhat of the discussions of whether that was going to be required or not. And I think certainly through planning, and maybe Mark can speak to this, I think it would certainly be a requirement, especially being defined within our comp plan as being defined as a very unstable slope, and also being at a slope of steeper than 30%. So I certainly think with the way Jason explained it to me today, is basically what, without a geo report, would be, is you take the size of the slope, the distance to the bottom of the grade, and basically lay that flat on the parcel, and that would be the setback. That is a very steep and very deep grade. So with that requirement, likely it would extend all the way out to the street. So without a geo report, it wouldn't be buildable, the setback wouldn't be able to be met. So
And
that
if
would
there-
certainly be a
If there
requirement.
was a carport or a RV port there, it's probably not going to be big enough to build.
It depends on the geo report.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Is there a canyon?
Because there could be a minimum of, depending on what they do find, the minimum setback is 10 feet from that slope.
Correct.
So if somehow, some way, an engineer could sign off on that and say, yes, that slope is stable, maybe some different foundation requirements, that footing requirements that may be met, there is a possibility that they could have some sort of building on that parcel.
Would that geo report be our responsibility or their responsibility?
It would not be the city of Shelton's responsibility. It would be the applicant's after, if and when we move forward with a vacation, then they would have to come in and apply for whatever they are going to construct, and then we would review through not only building planning, but also Public Works on what the requirements would be for moving forward with that application.
So what are we asking for tonight? We're not asking for a price, or are we? Are we asking us to?
Councilmember Dorsey, I'm really just looking for, after
Okay.
almost a year, just really some direction of how we move forward with this and discussions on this, and really just open it up to the council to get some sort of resolution to this, so that
Greg,
we've had this on our plate for quite some time.
I have a question about, since it's a vacation, there are some specific rules regarding vacations that it basically defaults to the two adjacent owners, or, I mean, we talk about it being a lot, but can it be a lot? Because it's a vacation of a right-of-way. Isn't there some rules that say that basically it can be owned by the two adjacent owner, or multiple adjacent, whoever the adjacent owners are?
Yeah, there are actually 3 adjacent property owners. There is 1 to the west, 2 to the east side of that. But yes, through RCW, If you vacate it, technically it would go to, if the adjacent property owners wanted it, it would go to the adjacent property owners.
Okay.
And compensation, if any, were required, that would be split evenly between the abutting property owners.
And then also in RCW, isn't there something about if it's been no public funds to acquire it, which is not, this was just old deeded street right away, that it's half the appraised value? Is that the way I read the RCW?
There is that statute, and then there's also the 25-year rule. So anything that would have been acquired sooner than 25 years ago would qualify for the half of the appraisal price. But this particular parcel or right-of-way was acquired back in 1890. So much more than 25 years ago, so the full appraised price could be sought after by the city of Shelton.
Even though there's no public funds?
Correct.
To acquire it?
That's
Okay.
correct.
All right, thanks.
There's already been a public hearing on this?
There has. We started this proceeding, we went through the first business agenda touch on it, and also a public hearing, and then it was delayed. And we started talking about overall city lands and how we were going to approach those and if we were following city policy or not. And that was really the reason for the delay. So we just really wanted to reset that and start back at the business agenda again to get some direction.
Did we ever give the landowner the indication that we were going to give this land for free?
The indication was we were going to follow city policy. That has been the direction. That was what was presented and attached even a year ago. And that could be anything from a zero price tag up to the full appraised value. And that is ultimately the decision of this council.
Because my understanding has been very variable in the past.
That's
Vacation
true.
by vacation, it's not been consistently applied.
That's
or
true. I think
consistently done.
most recently, over the last recent past, we certainly have been following by city policy, but you are exactly correct, Mayor. I don't know that that has been strictly followed before the past year or not, but certainly I think we have, in the most recent past, followed city policy.
Is there a canyon hook to that property?
There is. That's the very steep slope that we're talking about. That's really the reason that it could be vacated. There is no need for a roadway. There are no utilities that could be extended through that right away over to Keneo. It is a very steep, deep slope.
Yeah.
All right, I would say, just to throw something out there, if it's buildable and it's worth 25 grand, then we should sell it. If it's only partially buildable, like for this RV port, let's sell it for 12.5. Or if it's and zero if it's not buildable at all.
We wouldn't be able to determine that unless we went out and had a geo report done or study done. So that would be very difficult to assess what that was before moving through that process.
It would really depend on what is submitted as far as a building permit
Yes.
as well. It could be from a shed to
Right.
to a large single family, so it really would depend on what somebody wanted to build on there to determine the buildability of it.
Can we add this to that council session that we're gonna have, you know? I mean, talking about that, I suppose, I mean, I don't know if we're ready to make any kind of decision. You're looking for guidance, and it looks like we've got 3 different choices on this, and I don't know if there's any other information that may come in that would, you know, change our approach on this. It makes sense if the property is pretty much worthless, that we wouldn't charge for it. If it's worth putting an addition on it, it might be half price, and if you can, literally, we can't give a lot that is buildable, and we would be taking money from other citizens to give it to a citizen. If it was a regular lot they could build on, that is where that money goes back into the city. So I think Kevin Dorsey has an idea there, but I guess we might want to take a little time to discuss that. Maybe more, what do you think, Mayor?
Well, I just need to clarify, currently, it's not a lot,
Correct.
correct?
That's correct. It's a street.
Yes, it's a non.
It is a
it's a street
platted
right away.
street. Correct.
So it's not a lot. So it's not a buildable, even if it was buildable, it's not a buildable lot. It's a buildable city right away that's not
correct.
used for any purpose.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, just to clarify, I'm not sure there's a lot more information that we would have for you. Over the past 12 months, we have done extensive work on this and vetted this through not only planning and building, but public works. So I'm not sure that without having a geo report done, I'm not sure that there's a lot more that we can provide you in making this decision other than following city policy.
And if we don't do anything, that property will remain city right away.
We have no need to vacate it. We have no,
So-
yes,
so,
exactly.
I mean, it's going to remain as it has for the last 100 years.
Yes, it would.
Although I do think it's worth mentioning, if I understand correctly, if this portion is vacated and becomes the property of the abutting landowners, they would then be assessed on that property. Taxes would also be accrued against that property. So there is a financial impact, although not significant, that should be taken into account.
I had that discussion, council member, I had that discussion with all three budding property owners today, and really got the sense from all three of them that they're okay with the increase in assessed value and likely the increase in taxes, even though likely being a very slight increase. But they were not open to the idea of any compensation to the city for the vacation of this right-of-way.
I'm hedging. I'd like to discuss a little bit more, but I'm definitely hedging towards denial of the vacation. That's where I'm kind
I
of
mean, it
sitting
shouldn't
at.
take us a year to make a decision, though,
Understand.
and it's been a year. Maybe we can make one.
I'd like that, definitely. I mean, I'd like to move ahead on vacation, but subject to coming up with a price. And I guess if they're not willing to come up with a price, then I agree with Joe. So I guess you're pretty confident in that, Craig? Or
I had
plan-
an extensive conversation with all three abutting property owners today, and the sense that I got from all three of them was they were not willing to compensate the city for the vacation of this property. They were okay with the increased tax burden
Okay.
that they may have in the future, but were not willing to pay anything for the actual vacation of the property.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead,
Just
Council
to
Member.
clarify, you have one individual that might want to build a RV cover or something there, or in a garage. Doesn't one individual want to build something on that property?
That is what has, in the past, that is what has been indicated to us, correct?
That's one of the three people. So theoretically, in all fairness, the two people that aren't going to build anything on it, I could understand them not wanting to buy the property because the property is unusable to them. The one individual that wants to build something on it, I think could possibly pay something for that, because when he sells his home with that addition, he will gain some income from that. So I still don't think throw the baby out with the bathwater, because we're dealing with three individuals. One may want to build something on it. The other two, if I was them, I wouldn't want to be buying it either. So I don't think we're real clear on exactly what we need to do on this situation. Just, we either think about it more or we vote on something now, but we have one individual might want to build on it. That throws it into a different category for me if it was a vacated property that nobody built on it. That would be a lot simpler to say, done deal, take it.
Unfortunately, though, RCW does not give you the option to only charge one abutting property owner because it is valuable to that property owner. It is explicit that you would charge all three abutting property owners in this situation.
Yeah, so if I could jump in here, the way that there's statutes that basically govern how cities vacate streets. And the standard is that the street, the right-of-way that's there is basically split down the middle, and the abutting properties get up to the middle, and then you charge them based on what that is. And the city can't basically violate state law by coming up with some other deal. Now, those owners themselves, after the vacation's over, person A can buy person B's little stretch that they got for whatever they got charged by the city. But if the city goes through with this vacation, the way that it would work would be pursuant to state law, which is that we would split it up between the 3 owners. We would charge all 3 owners based on whatever price we decide the property's worth. And then if they, on their own, work out some alternate deal of how to pay each other and swap the properties around, they would have to do that later. So I think that's maybe something that should sort of guide your thought process. One question I had for Chris, Craig and I met about this earlier. When you say vacating pursuant to city policy, are you aware of any formally written city policy that addressed this? Or when you say city policy, do you just sort of mean?
No, there's a city policy that's actually attached to this briefing.
Oh, okay, I guess I didn't flip to that page.
City policy number,
About selling
About
public land, or about surplus land.
Surplus.
It's surplus
It's,
to public.
it's the same policy that we have looked at with YMCA and other
Yeah.
vacations.
sorry, John, and it's not
300-20.
necessarily the vacation, it's the surplus of city lands.
Oh, okay.
So John, please put that on our list, because I looked at other cities that have specific policy on vacation, so we will, in the future, we'll have to work on that.
Do we maintain that lot at all?
No.
No.
No, and it's got some very large timber on it.
Yeah.
City Manager McCarty and I went out and looked at it today, and it has some very large timber on it. I don't know if it's marketable. It's a discussion that we've had in the past of, what do we do with the resources that are on that property also. It's the same discussion we had with YMCA. So you've got that factor to weigh on also, is what resources do you have out there on that property?
But a lot of the property is already encroached on, I believe.
That is true.
Yes. So it's pretty bare. So, I guess we move forward to the study session, but I would approve it if subject to adequate compensation. I mean, that's where I'm at. And what adequate is, I can't define, but if we're getting the feeling or understanding that there's none being offered, then I guess for me, it's kind of a dead horse.
So Mayor, here's my process question, and maybe Mr. Collins can clarify. So we move forward with vacation of this city right-of-way, similar to previous, then we have sort of a next step. Then what happens if we do not get a concurrence from the deal of the property owners? Then what happens with that piece of property? Now it's been vacated, technically speaking, right? It has been vacated, but it hasn't been sold. So what sort of implications does that bring to us?
I mean, we would put in the ordinance, like we've done with, I mean, we have one going tonight, for example, where we're vacating a street and getting compensation for it. You put in the ordinance that it's essentially contingent on receiving the value, and then you cite the state statute that allows the city to charge for it. And then basically, the vacation isn't triggered until we get compensated for the land.
Okay, so simple.
And it wouldn't be executed until it was recorded.
Right.
And we have actually one vacation that is out there right now, Railroad Avenue, that we're waiting on a executed building permit before we actually record that vacation.
Okay. Right. Yeah. So simple enough then. If sale goes through, it's vacated and moves forward. If not, it reverts back. So I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, we have to come up with a number. What's the number?
Whatever we would appraise that, 25,000.
Full value.
John, would this be something that would be in an executive session to discuss
The cost.
the cost and value of that property?
Potentially, yes. Unless we're going to, I mean, the statute allows, since this street's older, since it's been a street longer than 25 years, it allows up to the fully appraised value.
Full appraised value. So do we want
Executive session.
to go to executive session, all right, for next meeting?
Before next meeting?
For next, on the
Before.
16th?
5:30.
Okay, all right. Is that reasonable with everyone?
It is with me.
I
Okay.
will not be in attendance at that meeting, but I will talk with you ahead of time and share any feedback I
There's
may have.
proxy votes, right?
Is that okay, Mike?
I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
Okay, all right. We'll move on. Thank you for everyone's input. I guess back to Craig on
Thanks.
Turner Avenue.
Turner Avenue project is complete. We are happy to report to you. And original contracted amount of $478,163. That project came in under budget at $450,841.48 and on time.
Good job.
Yay.
So we would like to
Okay.
move this forward to the action agenda for October 16th for final acceptance of that project.
Okay, any questions, comments for Craig?
Sounds good.
Okay, since I drive it every day, thank you, Craig. Thank the contractor. Okay, concurrence to move it ahead?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Next, one more thing for Craig, information regarding the 204 Birch Street property.
So again, we need some direction at the staff level of where we would like to go. I have spoken with Kelly Fretzen about the property at 204 Birch Street, which, if you're not familiar with the property, it is right at the corner of 2nd and Birch, kitty corner to the back of Mickey's Deli. It has a canyon creek that runs directly under the house, literally through the living room of that house. It has had some major flooding issues in the past. About 5 years ago, we did do the Canyon Creek bypass project, which has helped and mitigated some of that flooding, all of the flooding to this point. Over the past couple of years, though, I will point out, Kelly does have my cell phone, so I hear about when we get close to flooding and go down and check that out. So we have not had any in the past 5 years, but over the last couple of years, with more development up in the Capitol Hill area and obviously logging further out towards the headwaters of Canyon Creek, we have been very, very close to flooding. Even with all of as much of the water as we can divert down the Canyon Creek bypass, we have been very close to flooding again. And we have provided some pictures of what that has looked like in the past. You can see the amount of water that we have had down there and the amount of workload that we have had down there trying to protect those properties. And most recently, I ran into Kelly down at the property. We were down looking at the Basin 3 project and just happened to run into her. And love talking to her whenever I can, and just struck up a conversation. And she had indicated that she is getting ready to move to Arizona and was going to list the property for sale. And that was where we really started the conversation of, is this a benefit to the city and the stormwater fund? And I have to really reiterate that this is a storm fund, would be a storm fund purchase or project ultimately, because it does fall within the stormwater parameters. So we struck up a conversation about what that looks like. She did indicate to me that she had had a market analysis done on the property about a year ago. I did provide you a copy of that, and also the former stormwater study that was done down in that area. And by no means am I telling you that I would recommend moving forward with this entire study. There are some components in there that are very costly that I don't feel are something that we should move forward with. But this is certainly something that would, taking and removing that structure off of that property and opening up that creek, would certainly be a benefit to the stormwater department and ultimately likely a community benefit if we were to maintain that property as some sort of small community park ultimately in the future. So really would just like some direction on moving forward with discussions of whether we're interested in this property before it does go up for sale and on the market.
Just to clarify again, this is another purchase or sale type of situation. In the past, generally, we have executive sessions when it comes to a discussion of purchasing or, you know, or selling property. So I'm not sure exactly on if this shouldn't be discussed in an executive session also, just like the other one, but I'm.
Only price can be discussed in executive session. We can't discuss the actual sale. That has to be in an open public meeting. So that is why we are doing this now. But if we decide to move forward with
So we don't
this.
talk about price in our discussion here. Is that what you're saying?
You certainly can,
Yeah.
but we could go to executive session to discuss that. But ultimately, the discussion of whether to acquire the property or not would need to be done in an open public meeting.
I have a couple of questions. So Craig, do we have any idea what we spend each year sandbagging employees, et cetera, that might be alleviated by acquiring this property?
I don't have exact numbers
Ballpark?
for you. I would be guessing.
Okay.
In the past, before the Canyon Creek bypass, I would say you were in the tens of thousands a year. After the Canyon Creek bypass, you're probably somewhere in the thousands range. We do get some help from community service. Community service does a lot of sandbagging for us. They have done it in the past. But certainly with the Canyon Creek bypass project, it has drastically reduced that. We do have, you're probably somewhere in the $2,000 to $5,000 range annually now. But like I said, we have started to see an increased level down there in our heavy rains where it has gotten back to a point where in the first few years after the Canyon Creek bypass was done, we didn't see any hazard or threat down there at all.
And now you're getting a call from Kelly.
I'm starting to get calls in the middle of the night again, and going down, most recently, just a year ago, myself and the city manager went down and we had some real threats down there. We were trying to close off that bypass slide gate as much as we possibly could, and actually had water running down First Street back down to Dairy Queen to try to avoid flooding out that neighborhood once again. So
Which
we have
water
had those.
penetrating the road is not something we'd like to see.
We would
So-
not like to put stormwater and creek water onto our roadways, that's for sure.
And then the other question I had, Craig, was regarding the structure itself. If the city were to acquire the land, I anticipate there would be some cost with removing the structure.
Correct.
Do we have any idea what that cost might come in at?
We have done quite a few abatements with city staff, and normally we run with a structure of this size. We did just take down the structure a few years back that's right adjacent to the Canyon Creek bypass, that's just to the south of that structure, and it ran us at that time in the neighborhood of around 10 to 12,000. And those were equipment costs, employee costs, and dump fees to actually get rid of the structure.
So if we removed the house, how would we prevent the creek from flooding? What do you do to the creek?
I think ultimately you would end up doing some sort of study on the best way to use that, but my thought would be you would open that creek up a bit and actually make some sort of depression within that so that you could actually hold some stormwater on that actual property. So some sort of retention pond type concept.
And then there's a cost on that.
There'd be a small cost. It wouldn't be a lot. It'd be moving some dirt around and reseeding to open that up. But you'd ultimately, with the demolition of the actual structure, you'd be doing some dirt work as right along with that anyway, as we did with the property on First. We had to backfill the foundation and do some other things, mitigation to that property.
So would that be like a daylit creek where there would be some secure gate grading over the top of it so that people, how deep is that anyway?
It's a 3-foot culvert now. so it's about 3 feet to the creek bottom.
Because that part that's behind, that runs behind Neil's Pharmacy, you know, and then across under the road and over to, there's secure gating so that people don't fall in and drown. Is that a liability with that?
We've got some major creeks running through town that are not.
Right, I agree.
secured. We've got Goldsboro Creek that's a
Sure.
major, it is a large body of water that is not secure in any way, shape, or form. So that is
with the
something that
park-
we certainly could take a look at, and
You
I
have
think
NEPA
that's,
NEPA and fisheries and
Yeah.
doing anything within the creek and restructuring that creek, you're opening another can of worms going down
Yeah,
there.
okay.
but liability, I think, would be a question maybe for Mr. Collins or WCIA of what they would recommend we do to avoid any liability down there.
Okay, that just kind of popped in my head.
Yeah.
Councilmember Cronz had a
Well,
question.
depending, I see on the budget information, depending on the stability of your stormwater utility fund, if you have finances in that, which would not affect our general fund money because we're looking for some of that, I would enter an opinion that I think it would be the right thing for the city of Shelton to acquire this property, demo the building, and put up the right water retainment barricade so that this issue was done.
And going back to the storm fund is fairly healthy. Latest projections with the recent change in the downtown connector project, which was ultimately a 90-10 split. Originally, we weren't going to reimburse storm for any of that. We drew that storm fund down quite a bit, but ultimately that fund will be reimbursed, and projections end year 2018 are about $750,000 in that fund. So that fund is, and it's a fairly small overall fund, so it's got a pretty decent contingency built into it
But
now.
potentially moving ahead, we are going to incur more costs with stormwater abatement, aren't we, under some new regulations?
Certainly, under the new stormwater manual, you are going to have some increased costs.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And the other little part of this is, obviously, we need a fair assessment, I think, other than just a realtor's opinion on the value of that, because truly, if water's running under it at certain points in the year, I don't know that it's worth $99,000. So that would be something we would have to talk about, I think.
Yes.
I'm also wondering, since it's built over a creek, I'm assuming it might be post and beam type construction and not a foundation.
No, it is a foundation.
There is a foundation.
Yes,
It goes across the creek.
yes. Foundation is in pretty rough shape at this point.
Okay.
Craig, a question on your I know it's
And
ballpark.
it is over, Mark just brought up a point, it is over a culvert, so it's not,
Over a culvert.
correct.
Okay.
You made a guesstimate on how much we spend a year maintaining that creek during storm season. If this house goes away, we would still incur those costs because there's still houses that are in hazard zones, correct? Or would that be completely mitigated, or at least significantly mitigated by removing this house?
I don't think you can completely mitigate that because you still have obstructions downstream. You still have, that goes underneath a roadway. Right after it goes under this house, it's piped under the roadway of Birch Street. So you're not going to ultimately completely fix the problem. Certainly having some sort of retention for stormwater down on that property would certainly help the situation. It is not going to alleviate every issue and problem that you have down there with stormwater. We have creeks running through downtown Shelton. It is a problem, and it's always going to be a problem in heavy rains.
Well, I hear we should move this also to executive session on the 16th to consider acquiring the property. Is that
Yes.
what I'm
I
hearing?
Yes.
think that's what we should do. What do you?
Everybody
concur
good with that?
Yes.
Is that,
Yeah.
Price of the property.
yes,
Right.
yeah, agreed. Thank you, Craig.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay. Is that enough direction for now?
Yes,
sir?
it is.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, on to the action agenda. First up is Director Gregory is going to talk about joint venture for the adoption of the solid waste comprehensive plan.
So about a month ago, we did present this to the council, and there were a few questions that came out of that meeting. We went back and answered those. I think both of them came by you, Mayor. It was the hauling contract portion of the comp plan. And that is, to answer that question, that is contracted through RDC Republic. RDC Republic ultimately ends up subcontracting with LeMay Services for the transport from the transfer station down to the rail system down south. And then RDC Republic rails it over to Eastern Washington. The other question was in the revenue portion of the comp plan. It showed a section on page, I believe it's 120, actually 118. It shows a revenue
We have a 118.
of refuse tax / Shelton. And we went round and round trying to figure out what this was. It's in the amount of $60,000. Ultimately, Bart Steep from Mason County actually answered this question for me. It's not actually the city of Shelton. They consider the Ells Hill transfer station the Shelton transfer station. So it's the refuse tax that they get for any of the self-haulers bringing trash into what they consider the Shelton transfer station. That's where that
Thank you for
utility or
clarifying
refuse tax actually comes from.
Okay.
So I think we answered both of those questions. If you have any more, I certainly can try to answer those. But this is a great joint venture that we didn't spend any funds on. Ultimately, Mason County took the lead on this along with Mason County Garbage to complete this. And really, ultimately, the city just needs to have a representative sign off on that.
Okay. Anyone sign up for public comment, Todd?
No, there's no public comment.
Okay, questions, comments from the council?
No.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the adoption of the Mason County Solid Waste Comp Plan and authorize the Public Works Director to sign the letter of concurrence.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve and have Director Gregory sign the comp plan. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, next, back to Director Gregory for present an ordinance on the vacation of Govey Drive and Mountain View Drive.
Thanks again, Mayor, council members. We have discussed this 3 times, I believe, in public meetings, so I am not going to waste anybody's time unless there are questions. This is a vacation to ultimately improve the Mason General Hospital project for their parking and compensation in the amount of the full appraised price with some, I will clarify when I say full appraisal price, that there were some deductions for easements that ran through the property, and those were industry standard deductions off of the total appraised price. Those easements for utilities will stay in place. They will not be building any structures over those utility easements. So that was the reason for the reduction in the overall appraised price. But that ultimately ended up coming in at $140,000, which Mason General Hospital has agreed to pay that full appraised price of $140,000 for the vacation of Mountain View Drive and Govey.
Okay.
They'll be using that for a parking lot, right?
They will.
Okay.
And ultimately, that would be going back into the general fund.
Streets.
Yay, sweet.
Correct.
Right. So, Donna, any?
No public.
Okay. Questions, comments from council? Okay.
What did you just say? It would go back in the general fund?
General fund streets, transportation.
General fund streets,
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no questions, I'll ask for the second reading of ordinance 1928-0818.
Ordinance number 1928-0818, an ordinance of the city of Shelton, Washington, vacating Mountain View Drive and Govey Drive.
Do we have a motion?
I move to adopt, where is it? Ordinance number 1928-0818, an ordinance of vacating Mountain View Drive and Govey Drive.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt ordinance 1928-0818. Those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed? Ordinance is adopted. Next, back to, see, now I know why our meetings go so long. Director Gregory has information on funding the cleanup of the C Street landfill.
So, Mayor, council members, I am happy to present to you tonight a grant from Department of Ecology in the amount of $600,000 from Department of Ecology. Our portion of that would be 25%, $200,000 for a total of $800,000. And this is not the largest grant that we have ever gotten, but I think I'm most proud of this grant just because it took us so much work to get this one through. We went from the guarantee that we were getting funding for C Street landfill to we were so far down on the list that we would never get funding, and ultimately ended up working with the folks from Department of Ecology and built some great relationships as we were doing that and working through that process. Many trips over to Department of Ecology talking about the need for the continuation of the cleanup of the C Street landfill, and ultimately coming through with some funding to get that done, and keeping our ratepayers from the burden of paying for the cleanup of that. So these funds should, with the latest projections, get us through not only the remedial investigation, but the actual cleanup of the C Street landfill. There are still some more studies to be done, so that could be very fluid in what those costs would be. But ultimately, right now, what Aspect Consultants have told us and the budget that they have given us, this would get us with the remaining small portion of money that we have left from the original grant, the $285,000 grant, along with this money, would actually get us to and through an actual cleanup.
Well, it's always nice to hear that we got another grant.
Question, or, moving forward. Excuse me. Has anyone signed up for public comment? Okay, thank you, Donna. Now, council, questions, comments?
Look forward to moving this forward.
Yep, getting it done.
Okay.
Nope.
Councilman
I just
Tom?
wanted to let everybody know that, you know, Craig Gregory has done a phenomenal job. I mean, literally, and he won't take credit for it, very humble man, but he's done a phenomenal job for the city of Shelton in obtaining grant money. I just tell you, he is the best there is, and I greatly appreciate what you've done for the city of Shelton. And those trips over to Department of Ecology and all that stuff, these grants aren't free, and they require years and years of hard work and building relationships, and you have done a phenomenal job in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember
Thank
Krantz.
you.
Appreciate it.
One question, Craig.
Yes.
We've had public comment on this. Is there going to be a final, either feasibility study or plan published?
As soon as the remedial investigation is
Okay.
finished,
There
we
will
will
be a-
certainly publish that and what that cleanup will consist of, and then we'll move into that cleanup stage. But until we get through the actual remedial investigation, we won't be able to come up with a plan of how to, if it's ultimately a capping of that C Street landfill or whatever the cleanup is, we won't have that until the remedial investigation is done. And there's still a bit of work to be done on the remedial investigation. We're monitoring gases, in-ground gases. The groundwater wells have been drilled and being monitored. So there's still some ongoing study. So as soon as we do get that remedial investigation finished up, and hopefully that'll be done within the next about 12 months, we'll have an actual plan of how to move forward and actually clean up the site.
Okay, so you're still thinking that plan is still 12 months plus
It is.
out?
It's
Okay.
still a ways out.
All right.
There's some stuff, there's some things that just can't be rushed when you're monitoring groundwater and gases that you're trying to find boundaries of. And there's a bit of work to be done still.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
know, I know that we had talked about, when this first started, that Goldsboro Creek would be tested to see if anything had come down the hill into Goldsboro Creek. Is that still happening or not?
Well,
Is
that's
there-
done through the groundwater wells and to see where the limits of the leaching have gone.
Okay.
And I think we've found what those limits are, and
Okay.
especially to the south, the Goldsboro Creek direction.
Mm-hmm.
They have drilled wells out there to find outside of the limits of the leaching so that they don't have any gases or contaminants in the ground. And I think they've found those limits to this point. So they know what the extent of the actual cleanup footprint is.
So are we worried about Goldsboro Creek or not?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
It is not, that, if you've been up there, you'll see that it really sits in a bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And the contaminant footprint really is contained within that large depression, that bowl area.
Right.
And we haven't seen anything get out of those limits
Okay.
through the monitoring. So we're pretty happy about, and that's really ultimately why the actual cleanup cost that's estimated at this point is so low, is that the activities that have taken place over a number of decades up there have actually really helped out, and the garbage that is actually in that site is very old. It's already broken down for the most part. It doesn't have any methane gas coming off of it. It's a fairly old site, so there's not a lot of mitigation that needs to go into at least what we've seen right now. And like I said, that certainly could change. Stay tuned, because one small thing that pops up could add, hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars onto a cleanup like this. So I would caution with saying that we're done with this without having the remedial investigation finished up. So we'll ultimately wait until that's done before we actually have a cost to the cleanup.
And the Indian Nation, they're satisfied that Goldsboro, that the testing as far as Goldsboro Creek is clear? Because I know they run their salmon wheels in Goldsboro Creek, so they're.
I haven't had this conversation with them.
Okay.
Ultimately, the conversations that we had recently are in-stream flows, and they're more concerned about in-stream flows than what we've got at the C Street landfill
Okay.
at this point. So,
All right.
All right, do we have a motion?
I move to approve the C Street Landfill Remedial Action Grant Amendment Number 3 and authorize the mayor to sign Amendment Number 3.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to amend the C Street landfill grant agreement. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. On to our interim city manager's report. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor Rogers, council members. Well, it's been 2 weeks and 2 days. And as I've mentioned to some people, you hear the term of a newbie being, feeling like they're drinking out of a fire hose. I feel like I've been drinking out of a fire hydrant, running full steam ahead. But in all honesty, it's been a very enlightening couple of weeks. As I mentioned last meeting, a lot of things are the same, and very, very much is different here in the city. And I just want to share with you a general observation. You have a great staff here. You gave credit to Craig, with regards to his ability to ferret out and obtain grant funding. His work here is top-notch. Mark and his team, also just top-notch people. You have a staff that's very dedicated to the city, and I'm proud to be with this staff. But I will share with you, I've been a member of this community for a long time, albeit kind of absent for the last almost 20 years. The comment that I get from people on the street has been exceptional and been very humbling, frankly. For some, I've had to say in a very stern way, if you're going to be negative, if you're not going to be a part of the solution, then you're part of the problem. Now, I would say that that's a minority of people, But there are people that persist in a spirit of negativity that doesn't afford this great city council the opportunity to lead this city forward in a way that it needs to be led. And I tell people that. I said, you know, you have a brand new council. First of all, trying to figure out the best way to work together as a council, the best way to work with city staff as an organization, and the best way to work with the community as you move it forward. And I'm convinced that you're on the right path. You're on the right path, and that's what I tell people that stop me on the street, or call me up at home, or send me an email. How's it going? You got this and you got that, and you got that. You have your head above water. Well, I do. Not oftentimes. I'll tell you a little story about that. When I was younger, in fact in high school, and my wife and I grew up in Olympia, and she had a little boat on Bud Inlet. I had never water skied before. So she said, let's try your hand at water skiing. And this boat, I was a big kid, and every time the boat would pull me up, I would pull the boat back. And I spent, I think, most of the time cruising around Bud Inlet with my head just barely above water. And it wasn't really all that much fun. And I don't feel that way here. I think we're getting things in order and addressed. And I'm thankful to be here. I'm thankful to be able to work with your staff as we move the city forward. So thank you very much for that opportunity. So now a couple of details. The budget. Earlier this year, you hired a very, very capable woman named Sandy Hines, who you've been working with diligently over the last several months to, number one, address the budget shortfall that you found out that you had as you just came into office. I'm sure you were pleased about that. But you addressed it, and I give you credit for addressing that. You've had 4 budget retreats with Sandy and with staff to talk about options and opportunities with the 2019 budget. I attended the very last one of those retreats, as it was right after I got here. This last week was spent in trying to bring together the numbers, the budgets that have been submitted by department heads, and the revenue estimates that Sandy has been working on under your direction. Just today, I received from her a copy of the very, very high-level 2019 preliminary budget. And I want to say that this does not reflect all of the options and issues that you discussed in your budget retreats. There frankly just hasn't been enough time, nor does it reflect all of the wish list items that were submitted by departments. But from the general fund perspective, again, recognizing that it's high level, at this point to only be about $60-some thousand out of balance is not too bad. Now, I don't want to hang on that number because there's a lot of work to do this month, a lot of work to do. We start in again on Thursday, going through these numbers, fine-tuning, making sure that the numbers that are ultimately going to be presented to you the 1st of November with a draft preliminary budget that will include all funds are numbers that you can count on. So I don't intend to get into a discussion. Obviously, you just saw these numbers. I just got them late this afternoon. So there's a lot of details here yet to come. So, but I wanted you to see the general fund preliminary budget for 2019. Okay. So second thing on my list is an update on where you are with your recruitment for a permanent city manager. I talked with Bob Slavin on yesterday morning, after spending the weekend going through the applicants that he's received to date. And I think you all know that those documents are in my office. They're confidential, so, but you're welcome to look at them. You know, this early on in a recruitment process, applicants for positions like this expect that those be held confidentially. But at your, your convenience, anytime you want to come by and take a look at those, they're there in my office. And if I'm not there, Donna has the ability to get into my office to take a look at them. We talked about 9 candidates that we both felt were deserving to be sent a follow-up supplemental questionnaire. And so Bob did that yesterday with a deadline back of October the 15th. Now, keep in mind that the process is theoretically open until filled. So if there are other bona fide strong candidates that come in, then we'll talk about that and send them a supplemental questionnaire, and we may have to back off on the schedule a bit. But if not, I think that if all of those supplementals come in on October 15th, or most of them come in on October 15th by the deadline, then we can assume we've got some really serious candidates here. And I will say that I was pleased with the quality of the applicants. I'm not familiar with the applicants that were on deck the first time, but Bob said this group is far superior to the overall quality of applicants you have. There are a number of candidates in that list that I've known professionally throughout the years, and I was really encouraged to see some of the names on the list. So I'm hopeful that after review of the supplementals, that by the first part of November, we can have a shortlist list developed for interviews sometime in November. You know, one of the problems with recruiting this time of the year is you have the holidays in there. And so we have to be cognizant of, you know, people not being available during Thanksgiving and the Christmas break. So, but I think if we can keep on schedule, and if we're committed to the applicants that we've got currently on the short list, I think we'll be able to have somebody on board, you know, if not by the end of the year, shortly thereafter. So like I said, I'm encouraged. I think it's a real positive direction. Any questions about the recruitment?
To get a person on in late December or early January, is that enough time for them to give wherever they're working now notice?
That would depend.
Yeah.
It would depend on their own particular situation. If they're compelled to give a longer notice than, you know, a typical 2 weeks. Plus, it would depend, I think, on location. And if you select somebody from out of state that's got to incur travel costs and got to move a family out here, that could make a difference as well. So,
okay,
that's an unknown. Okay. A couple of times in the course of the meeting, the concept of study sessions has been brought up, and I think that is a subject for its own study session, frankly. But I would like to have a special meeting with the entire council next week at a time that you guys decide, because we have at least one issue that would require executive session discussion on labor contracts. You have 3 labor contracts that are up the end of the year, and we need to talk about direction and parameters on negotiating those labor contracts. I also want to discuss with you, and this is not an executive session item, but I do want to discuss with you some thoughts and get some direction on the 3 open positions that we are currently trying to fill: the city clerk, the HR director, and the combined assistant city manager finance director. And I have some thoughts, particularly on the ACM finance director position, that I am compelled to share with you. The other thing that I want to discuss in the study session, and it actually mentions study session, is the council protocol manual that I know was on your agenda back in June. And you took action on changing the meetings, but the protocol manual in its entirety is still on the table, as I understand it. And I think this is a very important document going forward, particularly with a new city manager coming on board, so that he or she is confident in their working relationship with the council, the protocol and the relationship building that this manual suggests. So I'd like to discuss that with you as well. And I think last but not least, in my former employer, the Association of Washington Cities, I know that many of you went to the AWC conference in June, and I hope you found that helpful. They annually do a series of regional meetings, and I think you may have seen information on that in your inboxes. I know there's one this week in Port Orchard. There's also one in Tumwater on October the 22nd. And if you would like to attend that regional meeting, if you could let Donna know, and she can get you registered for that. I'm going to plan on going. It's always useful to hear what's going on at AWC, particularly this time of the year, because they'll talk a lot about the upcoming legislative session, the AWC legislative priorities, and their top priorities rolling forward with the legislature in 2019. So if you do decide to go, let Donna know. She'll register you. Let me know, and we can carpool.
Yep. So are you talking about the one in Tumwater, 22nd?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's out at the Pellegrino Conference Center, right across from Costco in Tumwater.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions, comments?
Well, since we're all here, should we try to set a date for the study session?
I think that'd be great.
Okay.
Got a calendar. I just have one question, Mike. Did you ever learn to water ski?
No, I never did. I can snow ski, but
I just had to
it's a
ask
lot
that.
different.
Very curious.
It is.
Well, to start off with, shall we just say council night, Tuesday night
Sure.
at 6?
What day is that?
The
Oh,
ninth.
for the study session.
Yeah, next Tuesday at 6?
That I cannot do. I'm going to be working out of town in Spokane on the 8th, 9th.
All next week, Joe.
I can do the 10th, 11th, or 12th anytime afternoon on the 12th.
10th, 11th, 12th.
10th, 11th evening hours, the 12th anytime after 12 noon.
11th in the evening's best for me. 10th is the after hours for the chamber, so I'm unable to attend on
So how about Thursday, the 11th?
Thursday or Friday works for me.
Thursday.
Well, I don't mind meeting in the afternoon, but it seems like, if that, I mean, I don't know, we can do it. Is that, you're talking about a night meeting? Or?
Yeah, I can't do Thursday night. I have that high school, the Health Academy, the high school. So, I mean, there's not going to be a good time for all of us.
Friday afternoon.
2 o'clock?
Or, well, Joe, you said Friday afternoon works.
Yeah,
Could we do like a 1 o'clock?
Friday at 1 o'clock.
I could
The
extend,
12th?
I can extend my lunch hour, I'm sure.
The 12th at 1 o'clock.
Friday at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay, Friday at 1 o'clock,
And that's the date, what date is that?
the 12th,
Okay,
Study session.
very good.
And the duration?
10 hours.
We're taking that gavel away from you.
2 hours?
I would say 2 hours.
2 hours?
Block 2 hours.
Okay.
1 to 3.
We're going to go through the protocol manual. That's
And that is a
Okay.
week from this Friday.
Yes.
a week from this Friday, correct?
You can update me.
We'll all study the protocol manual
Have it memorized so we
between
can go
now
through.
and then in order to make the most efficient use of those 2 hours.
And
Yeah.
if you do not have a copy of it, just let me know and we can get you a.
And there has been comments provided. Hopefully you've got
Exactly.
those.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
Actually, that being said, can we just get that re-emailed?
Yeah.
Since there has been changes since last review?
Okay.
Just whatever the latest version is.
I can
That'd
do
be
that.
Sounds
fantastic.
good.
Yeah. Do you want the markup version as well as a clean?
Yes, track changes. Please and thank you.
So, anything else for the good order?
That's all I have, thank you.
Okay, so we've come to the end of the agenda, so our next meeting will be a study session on October 12th at 1 o'clock. Regular session will be next Tuesday, October 16th. So we're adjourned tonight.
Friday.